All right, everyone. Well, I have right at 2 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all for coming today. I think you're really in for a treat to hear about this amazing project. We don't often in these meetings get to talk about something we've directly engaged in. Those of you who are familiar with my real estate roundtables, we sort of move them around and focus on our outlying areas, knowing that not everybody always wants to come to FAR, and that this is a great way of focusing on Colonial Beach, Orange, Caroline, and even North Stafford and parts of Spotsylvania. It's great to be able to do this remotely. And we usually talk about economic development and what's going on. Well, this is something that's going on that FAR was directly a part of. So I'm very excited to get to that. Before we start, I did just want to give a shout out to Bayfield Home Loans. I hope you can see on my screen. They are our sponsor today, the wonderful Tanner Mulvihill. I will go ahead and put his information in the chat when I get a chance. For any of your lending needs, Tanner will be more than happy to take great care of you. So thank you to Bayfield Home Loans. So I'm going to give you just a little background on what we'll be talking about, because in a second, we're going to watch a short video that actually shows off the project that we're talking about. So this whole meeting is focused on the Orange African-American Commemorative Park located in the town of Orange. So Orange is a beautiful town with some great restaurants, so please go check it out. And now you have another destination to look at when you go there, the wonderful park that you will see some photos of and a bit of a walking tour in a moment. So how did FAR get engaged in this project? Well, they made it. Zan Nelson, who you will hear from soon. I had the wonderful pleasure of being able to sit down to lunch with Zan to talk about this vision of this park and really of transforming a tired, weedy space in the town of Orange. And this was an absolutely perfect fit for a grant that we have at the National Association of REALTORS called placemaking. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's taking a place in a community and making it into something special. And they really did an amazing job of doing that in Orange. But I'll just back up a little bit and talk about how we started doing all of this. So NAR introduced a placemaking grant quite a few years ago, but it is one of our relatively newer grants. And we try to get as many grants as we can for projects that we can utilize them for, because this is your dues dollars. These are directly supported by the dues dollars our members pay, directly focused on transforming the communities that you live and work in every day. So we had been using money for placemaking for something downtown Fredericksburg, and we're always looking with an ear towards what we can do in some other communities. Obviously, a lot of stuff happens in the Fredericksburg region, so it's easy to participate there, but it's not always easy for us to get involved in some of our other communities because we're not there on a regular basis. And this presented an amazing opportunity working with the Main Street affiliate in Orange, saying, hey, we've got a project that we think would be great. Do y'all think you could participate? And the board quickly said yes. We quickly wrote a grant, and we were very fortunate to be awarded one of the higher dollar amounts of $4,500 to participate in this park. So I want to leave all of the wonderful details to Zan, and she is also joined by one of the actual members of the community. I thought I saw her name on here. Now she's gone, but we'll get her back. So I'm going to go ahead, if you'll bear with me. I'm going to stop my screen for just a second, and I am going to show you a quick video. So I wanted everybody to have the opportunity to see what we were talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and give you a quick rundown of a walkthrough of the beautiful park and some of the surrounding community. So I'm going to go ahead and play. Everybody see that?
FAR was able to be a small part of this project by contributing $4,500 from an NAR placemaking grant to turn this patch of grass into a walk through history commemorating the thriving African-American community that once stood at these crossroads.
All right, so as you can see, the area was transformed into a place that has interpretive panels, a place for sitting and reflecting, and is just a really great, beautiful example of what the power of collaboration, and for us, a small part of the project was the power of realtor dollars from dues dollars like yours that go up to NAR and are able to be used in this placemaking grant. So with that, I'm going to bring in our experts here. So we have Zan Nelson and Mary Freeman. They are both going to talk to us here today. And I'm not seeing Zan on my screen. I think I might. Oh, Zan, are you there? There you are. I'm sorry. I stopped my screen share. All my little boxes changed where they were. So Zan's biography here is much too long for me to share. We'd be here for half an hour, but suffice it to say that she has done everything, including being a researcher, writer, advocate, public speaker. She's vice president of the Orange County African-American Historical Society, which is the capacity that I met her in, and was working closely with the Main Street in Orange to put this project on. Suzanne, I'm going to turn it over to you. And please, Mary Freeman is here as well. Mary, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, the first question I wanted to ask is, how did this idea of the park get started? I think one thing that's really interesting for our folks is everybody has lots of great ideas and they often don't get off the ground. So how do you turn that little nugget of an idea, wouldn't this be great, into the finished product that we just saw?
Well, Kim, first let me say that this project took several years. Once we got going, it took about a little less than 2 years. But the Orange County African-American Historical Society's mission is to raise awareness and then to share that awareness with the community as to the history, the lives, the achievements, the contributions of African Americans in Orange County. And often in particularly rural areas, that history is, let's say, it's neglected. And so, but it's wonderful, it's vibrant, and it tells you a whole different story than maybe you knew before. So that was the impetus. And the Orange County African-American Historical Society made the determination that we would begin with some funds we had raised to engage in this goal with interpretive panels. And in that video, you all saw the interpretive panels that we actually put in the park. But our thought originally was we wanted to put in 3 interpretive panels to showcase the commercial Black district during segregation. And almost every town has one. And almost always, if there is a railroad system in that town, it is near that railroad system. And regretfully, in many cases, those stories are not told today. And yet they're extremely inspiring because of the nature of them. They provide, and I'm getting into some more of the information, but I won't get too far ahead of you all, but they certainly provide not only that goal of raising awareness, bringing pride to the community that it references, and also it impacts economic development. So we'll get into that in a little bit more. But that was the impetus. So what we did in trying to decide where we wanted to put these panels, we were looking at 2 sites that were right there in that district. And you showed in your video a lot of the components, the physical components of that commercial district. And so when we got to the second site, we were with Charlotte Cole and John, who was the director of the Downtown Alliance and Main Street program for Orange, and the town planner of Orange, John Cooley. And the conversation came up that said, I mean, just very casually, well, gee, wouldn't this be the greatest little spot for a park? So it was like somebody took the interpretive panel plan and just lit a flame under it. And that's sort of how it began. Tied in with the Orange County African-American Historical Society's mission is the another program which I gave a name to about 2 years ago called Write the Record. And the organization, the Historical Society's organization, adopted Write the Records program because its concept was very much the same as raising awareness in communities of lost histories or neglected histories, not always African-American, but in many cases that seems to be the largest one. And the aim of the Write the Record project is to put those goals into some kind of tangible recognition or commemoration project. So I will tell you this, there's a quote in the Write the Record program that summarizes a lot of what we did here. And the quote goes like this: imagine a community that honors and commemorates the history of all of its sons and daughters. So I don't know if Mary, I will tell you a little bit about Mary. Mary is also on the board of directors for the Historical Society. She is a member of our history committee, which was the other kind of umbrella under the whole idea of interpretive panels. And then when we got down to the Juneteenth celebration, which was the ribbon cutting part of this park, she was on that committee as well. So she's been, and Mary is from Orange, grew up in Orange, and she can tell you a lot about that area.
Yeah, so Mary, I'd love to hear from you. You know, what was the community before, right? The thriving community that we're talking about. If you could kind of paint that picture for folks. I know when we started applying for this money, I had just coincidentally done an NAR webinar about how highways had really segmented a lot of communities.
Oh, yes.
It's not exactly the same thing in Orange, but when you think about just, think about your own experiences driving through places like New Orleans, New York, Baltimore, there are major highways that just absolutely segmented communities. And in many cases, just cut the legs out from underneath thriving commercial districts. And they typically ended up being in, African-American and other minority communities. And that really resonated with me, thinking about all the highways that I've driven in my life and said, wow, you look at it and sometimes there's very obvious things that are split, like a graveyard. I always drive through New Jersey. I'm from Connecticut. There was a graveyard that was split in half and you're looking, that's so odd. Well, it did that to communities where people no longer had those connections. Kids couldn't go out to play with each other anymore. So Mary, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the community in Orange and what you all were sort of aiming to get at with these interpretive panels.
I was born and raised in this area with 5 other siblings. And I have a deep impression of Orange as a child and the growth of the town to where I am now in life. My grandfather and his brothers were businessmen. They were entrepreneurs. They wore a lot of different hats. My grandfather ran a store. They used to call them entertainment joints on the weekend because Black people within neighborhoods were segregated amongst themselves. The interpretive panels embrace 2 of my father's uncles, my great uncles. They ran a barbershop in that district. So they're included in that history. And I have impressions of them as a young child, remembering them getting up and going to town to open up the barbershop. and the effect they had on the community. For me, the bringing recognition to that area brings value to the Black citizens in Orange. When I didn't mention this to any of the board members, but a white friend of mine, she told me when she stopped and she says, we were at the site, and she says, "What are you all doing?" I says, I explained it to her, and she says, "I am just so glad, you know, because when we were coming up, this was Nigger Town."
Oh,
This was Nigger Town. And she says, look at the awareness that your group is bringing. So you wipe that away, you give value to our children, you show them their history, you tell them their history. Black people were able to come out of slavery and survive and live and raise their children, and they lived off the land. They lived by being businessmen amongst themselves. They were frying chicken, selling it on the corner. For me, it's been very emotional because I lived here and I saw what segregation did. My family was the first group to integrate schools here. That was rough. So it's been a growing process, but it's a process that I'm really, really proud of. You know, and like you emphasized earlier, there's a bypass in Orange close to the track that took out a whole section of Black homes in that area. So given the history of the homes that were there and the people who live there, it's just so important. We don't have history recorded properly in the school systems in the state of Virginia. Writing the record is important to actually say how people live. And Black people were educated, they were smart, but they had to be to survive. So I get kind of emotional about it because I see others taking pride and realizing what we're doing, and people in the community, they really appreciate that park and the fact that the town and their history is being honored. We've had nothing but positive reinforcement from the young and old alike, and every piece of history we can gather and collect to tell the true story reveals more and more about true history.
So I'd love to build on that, talking about the community, and I'm sure it's very cathartic for people to come out and be able to tell their stories and the stories of their families. How did you engage the community, both folks who maybe used to live in the region or, you know, their families did, and the folks who live there today? How did you go about that sort of community discovery process before?
Well, the Juneteenth program, and Zan can emphasize this, the Juneteenth program embraced the community. We plan to use the park in the future to do storytellings and to do gatherings. We want to embrace not just the history, but we want to embrace the youth, their talents, and have them build a value about being in Orange and living in Orange. So it's not just the old, but we want to embrace the new going forward as well. It's different ways that we're doing that, and we're building on it all the time with interviews with the older generation, especially who are elderly, to try to capture the history. But we give youth awards. And in the park, we hope to embrace youth with storytelling and bringing their talents and having little mini programs.
And just to add to what Mary is saying, when our history committee took this on, and we'll get into a little bit later in this get together, some of the new things that we're doing that Mary and I are both involved in. But one of the things that's extremely important in building out this kind of project is to make sure, to the best of your knowledge, you can document everything you put in those panels and everything that you are publicizing. It's not enough in this day and time to just say, Uncle Bob told us this. I mean, you can say that, but you have to do a disclaimer and say we don't have documentation for that. So there was quite a process of research. And this was research in census records, research in the courthouses of deeds, and using old maps and so forth and so on. And then, as Mary mentioned, the other very, very important part of this is doing interviews. And most of those interviews are targeted with the elderly, but the families, and not just African-American families, white families as well, back in the day were much closer than they are now. They physically might all live in the same neighborhood, if not in the same house. So even younger people would hear stories. I mean, Mary heard stories, and she's certainly not elderly. Mary heard stories about her uncle and her grandfather, and she told me a wonderful story about a World War II veteran, but we won't go down that road right now. So that's quite a process. And we would do those interviews. We would bring the information back by, emails or face-to-face, and we would talk about, this was pretty much in the development of the interpretive panels, because the park was sort of a parallel development, and that was fortunately led by Charlotte Cole at the ODA, Orange Downtown Alliance Main Street program. And and all the contributors, donors to that, and we can talk about that a little bit later, the partners, but that they were the ones that, I mean, we were in that, but she was the leader on actually the landscaping and how many benches and that sort of thing. But documenting that history is extremely important. And I will say this here, one of the reasons why it's so important is not just because it's been neglected, but because it's been denied. And in too many communities, many of the African-Americans, the older African-Americans, and Mary, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but they know that history. A lot of the younger generation does not, but that there's been no vehicle, if you will, to share that history with the entire community. Because sometimes when they would try to tell it, somebody would say, oh, that didn't happen. And there you go. So the documentation is extremely important.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Can I ask how did you go about, who did the documenting? Was it all volunteers? Because that seems like quite an undertaking. And does the Historical Society have that repository of information? I remember as a kid growing up in Connecticut, my little teeny tiny town, every year we'd make a field trip to the Historical Society. And it was always really interesting to hear about which building, maybe George Washington or somebody else would have gone through that. It tied you to your community. So where is that repository of information for current and future generations to be able to keep telling those stories so they don't sort of wither and, not get shared beyond the great work that you all have done already?
Well, Kim, again, we're working on that. Our Historical Society is a very small one, and we're all volunteers. We don't have a hands-on repository, so to speak, although we took what other people this is a little off the subject of these interpretive panels, but we've built a new website, and other people have done things like brought together a database of all the churches in the community and all the old schools during segregation. We've put those on our website. So in some respects, there is a repository, but when it comes to doing the documentation for these panels, there was no one source to go to. The community itself had a lot of information. For example, there were 2 Black churches in just right there on that street. So we went to them for their background and their history. And there was a very vibrant, and it still exists, African-American settlement or community of residents called Mill Street. And we got information from people who had lived there, and a wonderful story from one lady. And she is now going to be in and this is how this networking all works. The Orange County Department of Tourism recently put together a collection of small, very short videos about Orange County. And they approached me and asked me, because they knew about this story, and they said, can we interview that lady? And so they did. And so she's going to be in one of these 1-minute videos talking about growing up on Mill Street. And Mary talked about entrepreneurs. Well, it wasn't just those who were business people. On Mill Street on a weekend, there were a number of people who would cook plated meals, and you could go into Mill Street and you could buy a plated dinner, or you could buy a sandwich. And this lady, when she was about 11 years old, the neighbor up the street did that. And she'd start serving at noon. And this lady said she just couldn't wait until noon. She ran up the street with, well, the amount of money has changed, but a dime, it was what it was at one point, to buy a potato salad sandwich. And I had never heard of a potato salad sandwich. I'm sure some restaurant in Orange is now going to start serving potato salad sandwiches. But nonetheless, so these kinds of stories bring that community to life. And now she's sharing that in an even bigger way than just where we have put it on the plaque, on one of those interpretive panels. So that takes a long time, because I did the primary research as far as looking at census records to see who lived there in the 40s, who lived there in the 30s, and that sort of thing, and looking at old maps, Sanborn maps, which tell you, where what is. And then others on our board, Mary, our current president, they knew people in the community. And so they would reach out to people, and then those people would tell us about other people. And we would do these interviews and we would collect these stories. So one of the things that the Write the Record program offers to communities that would like to do something like this and maybe don't have anybody to do the research or don't know how, is we'll come in and teach you how. And with guidance, anybody really can do it. It's very time consuming. Now, Mary may want to add to that, because we're in the process of doing some research for another interpretive panel.
When you talk about, when you talk about how do we know where's the validation and the accuracy in what we're doing, as Zan said, maps that are on file stating ownership, like the bypass took out a lot of homes, but we know from prior records factually that those homes were owned and lived in by some of the Blacks in the town. And pictures. We've been accumulating pictures even within my family. I have pictures of my uncles in that barbershop. Coleman's taxi service. There are pictures with his logo, the pool hall. And the gentleman who ran the pool hall, his son said, yeah, my dad ran that pool hall. And he also had two other businesses. He was a carpenter and something else. So that's factual. And a lot of information comes out of church records too. So, but it's just never been accumulated in one place. And I'm so grateful to the Historical Society for that accumulation. So there's a lot of validation that actually, when you hear the stories, you can start merging your facts that you've collected with the actual stories of the people who know information from that time period and can talk to you about.
Yeah,
I would also add, Kim, in case anybody on here, wants to do something like this, or wants to, has a friend who is doing it, that collaboration certainly, and we'll talk about that, some of the partners we had, but going deeper into collaboration. You have to earn, when you're dealing with a minority population, legitimately, there is almost a cultural distrust for the majority, whoever the majority has been. And in a case like Orange, the majority has been the white population, and mostly men. No offense to any of you guys in the audience, and the minority has been the African-American. So you can't just assume that you can go into a community as a new Black person in the community even, or certainly as a white person in the community, and say, I want your stories. You can't do that. You must demonstrate over and over again respect and their ownership of that story. It's their story. And hopefully through that, and with working together, I mean, our team on the Historical Society has both men and women, Blacks and whites, and we work together where one has an asset in one little pathway, another has an asset in another pathway. And in doing that, we hope we're building bridges and we're building trust. And there's still, even after the Juneteenth celebration, there are still folks who are a little skeptical. but the bottom line is we made it happen. And I think at one point there were those who thought we would not, this would not come to fruition.
right.
And we ran into some obstacles, but we just walked along shoulder to shoulder with Charlotte and Mary, and we said, okay, this is an obstacle. How are we going to work with it? How are we going to work around it, or whatever? So
Yeah, so
The beauty, I just want to say the beautiful part when you talk about trust and building trust is that things have evolved over the years with the Historical Society. There are just as many white citizens as there are Blacks who are embracing us, who like our programs, who are involved with us, who want to learn also. Yes. And the Black community coming out of segregation, they suffered. And people were saying, well, you integrated for equal education, but there was a lot of years of suffering going through that process because there wasn't trust from the white side. There wasn't trust from the Black side. We had to learn to merge together the two different cultures. A lot of people initially with education, especially, did not want to send their children to white schools. They didn't want them to be picked on for one thing, but they actually felt that Black teachers were educating their children far better and disciplining them far better than the white community could. They didn't want to trust the white community with their children. And those were difficult years. And some of the students that helped break down those walls still carry scars from being the first to have to go to integration and to be involved. So it's an educational process, but I'm just so proud to see now that those walls are coming down. Those walls
and they
are coming down.
are. And one of the things I didn't mention about Mary is that Mary is a retired school teacher, educator for years in Orange County. So my little screen here keeps going off. It has all my little talking points on
Van,
it.
you guys, just talking about the trust and the partnerships you built. Obviously, you all have maybe not gotten to every single person, but you have built incredible amounts of trust and collaboration within, all the communities in Orange. Can you talk a little bit about the partners at the table, financial and maybe in kind? Certainly the town of Orange had to be a part of this to permit what was going forward. And, it definitely took a village to get this built. So if you could talk a little bit about, and I know that Charlotte, and I'm so sorry, Charlotte Cole couldn't be here today. She very much wanted to be, but she really was, for me, she was my main connection to the project. And she always kept us updated on the funds that were coming in. And there were some exciting grants that were awarded to this project on a statewide recognition scale of how important this story was and how great the project was. So if y'all could talk a little bit about those partners, that would be great.
Our first partner was the Main Street program with Charlotte. And she stayed by our side through the whole process, right through the dedication at Juneteenth, and was absolutely, I'm not sure we could have done the park without her. And so it's not to demean the fact that the town, we built the park or rebuilt the park and put the panels in on what is still town property. It was a vacant lot, really just kind of mostly dirt and not much grass. It was not very attractive. So, and they weren't doing anything with it. So they were very supportive from the very beginning. The town council was very, very supportive of having this park here. And you all, I said in my talking points that I wanted to start with you guys, and you touched base with our project through Charlotte. I'm not sure we would have been able to connect with you, but that's the networking that is the beauty of partnerships. Yes. And not only did we have the local Main Street program, but they brought us into the state's, the Virginia Main Street program, and it was through a program that they had that we were able to get a $25,000 matching grant, and that really pushed us over the edge. We had other partners that maybe didn't give us money, but they were so supportive, and they were part of the Juneteenth celebration. And those, so the primary ones, just to go through it, is ODA, FAR, the Virginia Main Street program, and of course, the Orange County African-American Historical Society and the town of Orange. But the others are the Orange Department of Tourism. They were a partner. There's an art center just a block and a half away. They were a partner. The local high school band was a partner. And then we, because of Juneteenth, not funding for the park and the panels, But because of the Juneteenth dedication, we needed to raise a little bit more money. And the community just stepped up. I mean, lawyers, insurance offices, individual donors. There's a big landscaper in the county of Orange who donated a bunch of the plants. So, and then there were, as you see on the panels, the legacy community, and those are the people who gave us the stories. And if I could make a distinction between documentation and stories, and Mary, you said it very well when you said, once you've gotten the documentation and you go in the census records and you could see who lived where and what they did. There was a doctor who lived on the street that got annihilated. He had his practice out of his house. He later moved to Richmond, but they demolished his house. But we have that as fact, and we had a picture of his house. So then, as Mary said, when you hear the stories, they're all corroborated. So I think the partnerships were excellent. And the thing about partnerships is they're like that pebble you throw in a pond. One partner puts you on to another partner, and that puts you on to another partner, and you're networking and networking and networking. And not only does it help you with whatever you may need, whether it's an in-kind donation or funding, but it also helps to spread the word throughout the community. Let me, a perfect example, and I think you all, if any of you have done community organizing, you know that if you can get a group of children involved, then for every child, you probably get 4 or 5 adults, their parents, their aunts and uncles, their grandparents, and that's what we had with the band. Anyway, so the collaborating builds the positivity of what we're doing as well, and helps us spread that awareness. Now, there were other things that we had done prior to that were helpful in the research. This is just kind of typical what happens by the nature of the beast. But some years ago, this park is in the historic district. And some years ago, they had done a walking tour of the historic district. They did include the 2 Black churches, but they didn't mention that they were Black churches. They included nothing else about the Black residential and commercial areas within that historic district.
That's such a missed opportunity.
However, 3 or 4 years ago, before we started the interpretive panel project, they were going to do a reprint of the walking tour, and they wanted to include the African-American stories. So our organization worked with them on that, and now that new walking tour has a lot of this same history in it. So, you know, you do one thing and it expands into several things.
Mary, I think you had something to say too.
I think Zan pretty much encompass some of the things I wanted to reiterate. You know, I think our county there's more to the story. I find the research that we do uncovers more and more information. I was reading a report that Zan sent out that a student had finished, and in reading it, I found out that some of the local school names was actually assigned by Black residents. So there's always something to learn. And I think the more you expose what we're trying to do, the more assistance we're going to get from the people who have their parents' histories. If there's so much out here that's hidden in people's closets, old photographs, and that can add to our histories. Life at Elementary School actually put out a newspaper, and it was very fine indeed. Out of that Life at School, they actually published a newspaper, and it was like maybe monthly, and they had a class that did the editing. Things like that need to be told. Some people in the community actually still have copies of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a question come in on the chat. So Randy, who you can see on the screen, him and his wife attended the celebration on Juneteenth, and he was wondering how you were able to get Congressman Spanberger to come.
Okay.
It's a busy
Well,
meeting.
and we got a little flack because she was the only elected official. Unfortunately, the flack was tiny, tiny, tiny. We invited all the elected officials, regardless of political party, to that represented the Orange County area, all the way to the United States Senate. And Abigail Spanberger was the only one who accepted the invitation. We didn't even hear from some of them. And I will say that you know, you send out reminders to all these people. You don't just send, it's not a build it and they'll come. You just have to keep nagging them. But I hope, Randy, that answers your question. One of the things that Kim had asked me before that particularly for you all, I think is important for us to mention, and it was under, you know, what is the goal of the park? And we've talked a lot about disparity and undoing some of those things, and that is extremely important, but it's not the only thing. So I did, Mary, you may have some things to answer too, but I made 3 points. One was to provide an attractive and pleasant space to learn and reflect. So it's a nice place. If you've brought lunch and you want to get out of the office, you can go sit on one of those delightful benches and just, there's a big, beautiful tree there and it's lovely. A space for future gatherings. Mary mentioned this. We're hopeful of having some Sunday afternoon programs at the park that could include storytelling. And these might be stories. One of the things that we've talked about in Mary and I's group is that we'd like to get young people who've heard stories from their parents or their grandparents. And do they think those are crazy stories? Do they like the stories? Do they not believe the stories? Whatever. Anyway, and perhaps some musical programs. But what also is very important, and I think this is a big reason why the Downtown Main Street program, because they're very economically oriented in that placemaking. And that is that it enhances the neighborhood. And it is in the historic district. There's some wonderful buildings down there that could be purchased and rehabbed and turned into something very dynamic. And this is the beginning, putting, rehabbing this one little space and putting in a lovely park. Now, Mary, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on goals of the for the park.
Well, I think the park will be there. As Anna says, it's pleasant. It's got there's a fountain there. People can use it. The whole town will be able to use it and embrace it. It'll certainly be more attractive for people to go there, whether they're walking or they need to sit down with their kids on a Saturday and just have a nice place to enjoy. And they can embrace the fact that they're in the Black Historic District and have a positive experience looking at the information that's there, their children being educated. It's going to add to the town. There's another park a little bit across the street that's also there, but I think it'll give value to the town, and it's going to bring the youth and bring people back into the town. We know we've lost a lot of our main streets. A lot of the businesses that were in Orange when I was a child are gone. We had a department store. We had two stores that were custom stores, high-level custom stores. There was a Five and Dime. A lot of that has been lost. So I think we're going to embrace people to come back in and value what's there and build on it and want to have an entrepreneurial spirit. And the businesses certainly have embraced our programs.
Right.
And
That's a great, it's a great
yeah,
segue into
you
our
know,
last question.
now even when we have the festivals in Orange, that street is being used.
Yeah.
So it's not just for us to have special programs, but when Orange had their street festival, people were using all of that area. And in doing that, they had a chance to experience it, stop and look at the information that was there as part of their day.
Yes, you said one of the goals was to build on that. So I have to ask, you have so much energy and enthusiasm and momentum. What are next steps, either, for the park? And I said there's programming or other projects that you're looking at.
Well, Kim, we've
That's a
talked
lot.
about wanting to do storytelling programs and maybe even have Juneteenth there next year, but have it bigger and broader on Short Street and Church Street and what have you. But Mary and I now, and the other members of the history committee, are going similar projects having to do with different Black settlements. So we've picked two as our next. One is what they call the Tibbstown community, which was near old Blue Run Church. So it will be a combination of telling the story about Blue Run Church, which is the oldest Black church in Orange County, but it started in the 1700s as a white church. And we've found some wonderful, wonderful information on Tibbstown through collaborating with other people doing, like Mary mentioned, it was a UVA student who did this report on Tibbstown. We're also doing another settlement, and in many of these rural communities, in urban areas, you still have the same thing. They're just not spread out so much. You may have an Irish community or a Czech community or whatever, but in a rural area, they're spread out over the whole county, and they are Black settlements that came to be after emancipation. And they came to be for a lot of reasons, but they are anchored usually by a church and then by a school. And so we're doing the Tibbstown community and the Little Petersburg community. And we're trying to not bite off more than we can chew in any one 18-month or year-long period of time. But we might do tours. We could do walking tours of the Black community in town. We could do self-guided driving tours once we get a little more interpretation out there in the county. And it all goes to raising awareness.
But what's important about this getting the settlement history, Zan said something that was very important. Every settlement had church and school, and that's where your community leaders emerged from.
Mm,
Just in this reading today, we saw one pastor who started 5 or 6 churches in different
yeah,
settlements, and he was a true leader. He needs to be in our history. And within Orange, there are a lot of people in Orange that are generational. I can trace my family back to plantations here in Orange, and I'm not alone. There are a lot of people who've lived in like one area, maybe Rhodesville all their life, their parents, their grandparents before them, or Barboursville, and they can trace their family back to the 1800s. So that is the history. It's like when we open up the door, we get a lot. We're trying to document one thing, but you uncover, it's like digging up, you uncover something else, and Zan will say, we need to do something with that later on. That needs to be documented. That's another story to be told. So for me, that's the excitement of it. You can just in general conversation, somebody will say, oh, that needs to be recorded too.
Yeah, well, this has been amazing. I mean, the park itself obviously is incredible to go visit and see and learn about, but the stories are what make it real and what, really put that history behind. And I think all of us, I know Paige was able to go to the Juneteenth celebration as well. Paige and Deb Ellis, our president, and I went to the groundbreaking back in the winter. So it's been really fun to be a part of this and to see it come to fruition and to hear the stories. I know we heard some very powerful stories at the groundbreaking from people who had lived there and were able to have that great poem that was displayed. Those are very powerful stories. And I encourage everybody, if you head out to Orange, there's some great wineries, there's some great restaurants, and go give the park a visit, and you can capture that history for yourself. Does anybody on the call have any questions or comments? I know we had great comments in the chat. Don Curry, thank you so much for that wonderful feedback. And anybody else have any questions for Zan and Mary before we have to break? Anybody? Well, thank
Kim,
you.
I don't want to cut.
No, Zan, go
don't-
ahead.
I don't want to cut anybody off. I just want to thank you for this opportunity to help us in just another way to spread the word.
Absolutely.
These kinds of things can be done everywhere. And what a beautiful thing it is at the end of the day.
Yes.
I am just so
Everybody
proud.
wins.
Yeah, I'm proud for our youth. When I first started teaching in this county, children were not even aware of what the historically Black colleges and universities were. And I've seen so many students grow. And I know the Historical Society is going to make them even aware and making them proud of where they come from and whose shoes they are standing in, and the footprints that went before them gives them great pride. I spearheaded with a teacher the first Black history programs, and those programs, what we did, and just to give you value, we brought back the first 6 students who integrated Orange County High School. We had a crowd of over 2,000 people for a history program at a high school.
Wow.
And that was the neighborhood interest, both Black and white. So every day I see growth, and I see people coming together and working for a common cause. And I sincerely appreciate you all. I have to say that. Thank you so very, very much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for letting us be a part of this project. We really, we're happy to do it. And, working with Charlotte and with Sam made it very easy. And we are excited to hear about your future plans. These are not one-time awards. We can certainly ask for follow-up for the next step or another project. So please keep us in mind. Zan, you have my information. So we would love to hear from you all. We'd love to help you in, any future endeavors that you have. Town of Orange or in the County of Orange, we are there with you and would love to be able to stand with you again on a project like this.
Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time and attention. And Zan and Mary, thank you so much for sharing your stories and the story of the park. We really, really appreciate it. And we've recorded this, so we'll be able to get it out, not just to the people on this call, but send it out to our entire membership. So thank you.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'll share that
Thank you
recording
all.
as soon as we finish.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Have a good
Okay.
day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.